hottest station is now live for your enjoyment with host iamBranded.
Actually, we don't have to wait any longer because we do have the young lady on the line right now on VPD's Wednesday exclusive. We have Miss Dr. Judi Bloom in the house tonight. Judi, how you doing?
Good evening, and how's everything in Chicago?
It is lovely. It is lovely. Dr. Bloom, we are so glad that you were able to call in. Of course, I was also telling you that a lot of people have been waiting to talk to you, you know what I'm saying, because you know a lot of people have relationship questions, and hopefully Dr. Bloom can help them out wherever they need their help.
No problem, and I heard you say any kind of relationship problem, and that includes sexual problems. So, yes, that's fine, too. We can talk about whatever anybody wants to talk about.
Oh, okay, all right. Let's see, there you go, people. If you got a sexual question for Dr. Bloom, you know, she is in the building tonight also. She is a licensed doctor, so that means, you know what I'm saying, although the guru, you know, gives y'all advice time to time, you know, Dr. Bloom is licensed in doing so. So, you know, you might want to work with her. But anyway, Dr. Bloom, thank you for calling in tonight. And from my understanding, you know what I mean, you deal with more things besides relationships. Can you tell the people out there what are some of the things that you are able to help people with besides just relationships?
Yeah, I work with relationships, but I also deal a lot with people who are experiencing anxiety and depression and lots of addiction problems, addiction of all kinds. So that can mean, you know, alcohol, drugs, sex addiction, and there is a difference. People need to understand that between a normal, healthy sexual appetite and sex addiction. You know, food addictions, gambling, all the addictions that people deal with. So those are all things that I specialize in, as well as relationships. And, of course, all those things, anxiety, depression, and addiction, have a lot of impact on people's relationships.
Okay. Now, I have a question as far as sex addicts are concerned. Mm-hmm. Like, as far as sex addicts, I've always been curious about this. Like, how can you diagnose a person to be a sex addict? Like, what, you know, basic qualifications do they? I understand it might seem like a dumb question, but, you know, what really, like, do people really have, like, trouble, you know, withstanding having sex like that?
Well, you know, you think about it like the difference between somebody who's an alcoholic and somebody who's a social drinker. Okay, they're like it's two different things. The person who's a social drinker is somebody who, you know, drinks, you know, moderately, doesn't drink every day, doesn't drink all the time, doesn't get blasted every time they do drink, right? They just, you know, they go out, they, you know, with their friends, they might have, you know, a couple drinks, and that's it. Or they're at dinner and they have a couple glasses of wine or something, and that's it. They're done. That's a normal social drinker. Somebody who's an alcoholic, once they start drinking, they just keep drinking until they get, you know, totally blasted. Or, you know, even if they don't do it every day, when they do drink, they drink out of control. That's like a binge drinker. Then there are the alcoholics who just simply drink every day. And even if they can be functionally alcoholic, you know, they can keep a job, whatever, they're still consuming, you know, really large amounts of alcohol, and it does begin to really interfere with their lives. And, you know, that's the difference. So with sex, it's really kind of the same thing if you think about it. Normal sexual healthy appetite is normal, you know, wanting to be in a sexual relationship with somebody. That's normal. But somebody who compulsively needs to keep having sex with lots of different people, even if they're in what's supposed to be a committed relationship, or somebody who can only get off if they watch porn. You know, they watch so much porn that that's the only thing that stimulates them anymore. It's that kind of thing that makes the sexual aspect of the self out of control.
Now, can I ask a question? This is Chris speaking. You said that if the person is compulsively having sex with multiple different partners? What if it is in a committed relationship with that partner, but they need it all the time? Does that classify them as being a sex addict?
So let me understand the question. You're saying if somebody's in a committed relationship,
Yes.
but they still are having sex with lots of other people?
No. You already cleared that up. That
Right.
would definitely be a sex addiction. What I'm saying is, let's say I have my one committed partner, and I just have to have her all the time, twice a day, all the time, more than that.
And you just like a lot of sex. No, that's not a sexual addiction. No.
Okay.
That's just your own personal libido.
So if you have the same amount of sex as you would with multiple partners, but you only have it with one person, it doesn't count for
and it's consensual, and it's something where that other person also, desires to be in a sexual relationship like that, right?
So then is the
Then that's-
solution
then
for
that's the
sexual
thing both
addiction
have
to just patch them up with another sexually addicted person?
Well, it doesn't mean that that's not a sexual addiction. Wanting sex, twice a day because you have a high libido, a high sex drive, doesn't make you a sex addict. That's not a sex addict. That's just somebody who has a high libido. I'm just saying you want to make sure you're with somebody who's got an equally high libido, because otherwise that's, it's going to cause fights, right? Otherwise it's going to cause problems,
Yes, indeed.
right?
Okay. As far as your past, I understand that you used to be a TV news anchor before you became a psychoanalyst.
I was a television news reporter and anchor for a long time, in Los Angeles and in Philadelphia and Miami and New York.
Oh, okay. And now you have a doctorate in criminal psychology.
In clinical psychology, that's correct.
Right. So when, as far as when you are, analyzing criminals in this,
Not criminals, clinical.
I mean, I'm sorry. When you're analyzing people, what is it like? Different types of addicts or people of depression? Is it some people that can kind of be depressed, but they can they can let them go? They don't have to be analyzed as thoroughly as some people that are suffering from depression, very, very strongly.
Well, I think really, the question is, when somebody's suffering from depression, what's the degree of depression? And,
Right.
Depending on the degree of depression, that would influence, for instance, if the person needed medication, right? Some people need medication, some don't. Also, some people, want to get medication for the depression. Other people are very medication adverse. They don't, even if they could benefit from it, they just don't like medication, right? So, you've got different people, different strokes for different folks, right? So
Right.
it's really, but in therapy, we deal with the way people think about things, and we deal with how people hold on to certain kinds of thoughts and feelings. And that's really our goal is in therapy. So if somebody's depressed and they come into therapy, some people, will need to stay in therapy for a longer period of time to really deal with the underlying depression and the issues that are behind that. But everybody, I think, can really benefit from therapy in some manner, shape, or form, because really what it does is help you understand yourself and really get to a point where you really are comfortable with who you are and how you are in the world, and where your world is functioning in the way you want it to function for you, where you're happy to get up in the morning and go do things, and you're grateful for the life that you have. That's what therapy can do for you. So I think there's hardly a person on the planet who couldn't really benefit from being in therapy for at least some length of time. That doesn't mean forever. For some people that may mean a couple of sessions for to really kind of clear some stuff up that's in their head. For other people, it can be a longer period of time. But it really just depends, again, on the individual. And really, one of the things that I do is really help people, learn how to not attach to their thoughts and feelings so that they rule them. And to really recognize that, and also to see how they twist things up in their head, how they look at things and they catastrophize that everything's awful or terrible, or horrible, and, no, sorry, it's not, maybe it's difficult or maybe it's uncomfortable, but it's not, nobody's going to die. It's not the worst thing in the world, so it's kind of helping people look at things differently is also a big part of what goes on in therapy.
Dr. Bloom, I have a question, and also people can actually check out Dr. Judi Bloom online. You can go to www.drjudibloom.com for all the information you need as far as contact number, email address, and everything. And you said something that was pretty interesting about just therapy in general, because I feel like, especially when it comes to relationships, marriages, depending on, you have multiple kids or you have certain things when you go through the marriage process as far as things that will change your status. I mean, you might have to do certain things to be able to, bring back that romantic spark or something like that too. But my question is, when do you feel that it would be necessary for couples to get counseling? Is it right in the beginning of a marriage, or is it later on, like, maybe the second, third, fourth, fifth year? The reason why I ask that question is because I kind of feel like it doesn't matter if you're in the happiest relationship the first year. I kind of think everybody needs some kind of counseling or therapy when it comes to marriage and couples, right?
I think you're right. And people can benefit from doing couples work at various stages of the relationship. A lot of people, will come in to see me because they want premarital counseling. Okay, before they get married, they want to, they want to really make sure that they're truly on the same page, and that this, this marriage is going to work. We all know how high the divorce rate is, so it's a really good idea to do some premarital counseling and really just kind of explore some things with a therapist that might be hard to talk about just on your own. So, and a therapist will ask you questions you might not have thought of, that you need to really explore with your partner before you take that step. So I think that's a good thing to do. Again, as you mentioned, when you have kids, it changes the dynamic of a relationship. It just does. I've got kids, I know, It changes the nature of your relationship, and that's also an important time to really make sure that the two of you are keeping the romance alive in the marriage, keeping the connection alive in the marriage, that it hasn't become just about the kids, and learning how to do that you're on the same page when it comes to parenting and parenting styles. So all of those are things that you can explore in couples counseling. And the bottom line to this is the sooner the better. The biggest problem that I see is when people come to see me and there's so much hurt and pain and anger and all that stuff already built up. If you come in when you're at that point, it's a whole lot harder to turn it around. Mm-hmm. But if you come in when things are basically okay, but there's some stuff that just isn't working, or there's some stuff that it's kind of really gnawing at you, or, when you're in that kind of a stage, that's a really good time to come in, because then you don't have all that anger or resentment already built up, and there's a whole lot that we can do to turn it around.
So even having a marriage, a happy marriage, it's actually it would be a good thing to come talk to Dr. Judi Bloom about just anything, because what you said was crucial too, that you might add something or you might say something that the newly married couple may not have talked about or experienced or anything like that yet. So I just kind of think, to me, because I'm divorced, and I look back at the marriage and I wish, because I had the premarital counseling and everything, and just looking back, because of course you don't want to get married to get divorced, but I do look back and I wish, hey, you know what, if I did something different, maybe we could have did something within that first year before it all blew up, to maybe go to counseling or something like that. So that's kind of crucial for a lot of young people getting married now, because the divorce rate is high, and we don't want that for this coming up generation.
That's exactly right. So it's nipping it in the bud. You know what I mean? It's saying, let's deal with it early. And if you deal with it early, then it doesn't grow.
Hi,
Now,
Judy.
go
You
ahead,
want to go,
Blue.
Judy?
No,
Okay,
go ahead.
I'm also interested in psychology and, helping others solve, for a better solution. I just wanted to know, do you ever get overwhelmed with helping so many people with different, situations and problems and issues? Does it get overwhelming, and how do you deal with it?
Well, a lot of therapists do have, kind of a burnout factor. That's true. And for me personally, I think actually it was a real benefit that I was a reporter as long as I was, because being in news, you can't, you deal with so many different things all the time, and you can't take it home with you. I mean, it would make you really nuts, So you really learn how to just dissociate from the actual story you're covering enough so that you can still, ask the right questions, but you get very objective, right? As a reporter, you're really objective,
Right.
and not take it home with you. So that skill set that I built up in all those years when I was, doing TV news made me a very good therapist, because it allows me to be very empathetic and very connected with my patients, and yet maintain a degree of objectivity so that I don't personalize and I don't take it home with me.
Okay.
Now, Dr. Bloom, I had a question as far as being a therapist. As difficult as being a therapist can be, is it uncommon for a therapist to have to see another therapist?
No, it's very common. In fact, I treat several psychologists and marriage and family therapists in the Los Angeles area I have as patients. And that's very common, actually, and it's a very healthy thing to do, because it's a good thing to make sure your stuff is clean. You know what I mean? And I'm part of a group of, 5, well, there's 6 of us total, that meets once a month, and we're all therapists, and we meet once a month and just, discuss cases, obviously without names or details, in terms of anybody identifying anybody. But we, talk about our cases and what's going on and get insight from each other on stuff. And that also is really helpful. That kind of, peer supervision is also really helpful. It keeps you clear. It keeps you on target. It keeps you so that you're in a place where you're good, and then you can help other people.
Well, let me ask this question. Now, I understand, like, some people might be listening right now and be like, well, if it's a therapist and another therapist, then how can I even trust a therapist? How can you, really...
Well, that's a good thing. I mean, if you know your therapist isn't, gets therapy for themselves, that's a good thing. Again, it means they're dealing with their own stuff so that they don't bring it into your sessions. So that's actually a positive thing. How can you tell if somebody's a good therapist? A lot of it is, getting referrals from friends to people that they've used and they liked. It's, checking people out on the web. You can go to people's websites. I've got a website, and you can really check them out. You can, talk to them. Talk to more than one therapist, and if you don't connect with the first therapist you talk to, then talk to somebody else. A lot of it is about the connection. It's got to be the right connection. And some people just, aren't comfortable with somebody. It doesn't make them a bad therapist. It's just, they may not be the right therapist for you. So all of those, you've got to trust your gut on that a bit. But I think also, just checking them out and, certainly asking friends or, your family doctor for a referral is also a good way to go.
This is VPDC's Wednesday Exclusive. We're talking with Dr. Judi Bloom, and also, about your website. I understand that you give Skype sessions out.
I do. I do Skype sessions, phone sessions, so you can be anywhere and I can be anywhere.
See, I like that. I like that.
So as far as the Skype session is concerned, say VPDC.
Although there's a technicality here, and I do have to point it out. Legally, we are all licensed in the state that we live in, okay?
Right.
So
Right.
I am licensed in California, so I'm not licensed in other states. Neither is your attorney or your, you know what I'm saying, or your family doctor, you know. But that's how it is legally. So just people need to be aware of that. That's all, and I need to say that.
So Dr. Bloom, if Deezy lives in New York and you're out here in California, can
Right.
you have a Skype-to-Skype session with him, or
Yes,
no?
I can have a Skype-to-Skype session with them. What I can't do is bill their insurance company and say that I met them in my office in California. Okay, that would
gotcha.
not be legal.
Gotcha.
But I can still do a Skype session with them.
Right.
Okay, I just can't bill
So-
their insurance company.
Okay. So
Okay.
also discovered this by talking with Ms. Bloom. You're working on a documentary series. Can you tell the people about that?
Sure, I am really excited about this, and this is, sort of totally separate from my work as a therapist, but it's closer to my work, when I was doing TV news. I am doing a television documentary series called Art World, and Art World is going to be a 13-part series about art around the world and the cultural and political influences that spurn the different kinds of art that develops. For instance, what's happening in the Middle East and what kind of art's coming out of there now, what's happening in China and what's the art that's coming out of there, what's happening on the streets in Los Angeles or Chicago or New York and the kind of art that's coming out there, and then comparing that historically to what different cultural and political movements have led to in art. And we're going to have profile different artists in all different places, and then we're going to have a celebrity host and a curator and a collector and the artists in each city, and we're going to let our audience select one artist per show, and in the final show everybody's can vote, and the winning artist will get some major prizes.
All right, there you go, people. So open your horizon, stop watching all the reality TV, and watch something that can benefit you.
Exactly. That's going to
Yeah.
educate you at the same time, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to do.
Yeah, exactly. So at this point, we're probably going to take some callers that want to ask Dr. Judi Bloom. As you can clearly see, she is well endowed in every subject that you possibly could ask her. So if you want to ask her about sex or relationships or breakups or marriages or whatever the case may be, you know what I mean, make sure you call that number, 347-215-8653. Once again, the number is 347-215-8653. Press the 1 button when you do call in.
Also, you can send emails, because I've actually gotten email questions, chat room questions, so many questions for Dr. Bloom. We're going to try to get as many as we can real quick, but you can send emails over to branded@nexxlegacy.com. And if you don't mind, Dr. Bloom, one question, actually it's been like a multiple conversation in the chat rooms that we have tonight. And the question that I knew I was going to ask you as well, and I'm pretty sure millions of other people have probably danced this question around you before, but what happened to the sanctity of marriage nowadays? Because we did say the divorce rate is super high, and it just seems like everybody get married just to get divorced, or they get married for the wrong reasons, or it's out of convenience. But what happened to just what marriage meant to people that really want to get married for the right reasons?
Well, I think you're right. And we live in a disposable society, right? Everything is, immediate gratification, and if it's not immediately gratifying, we're on to the next. So people aren't willing to deal with the normal kinds of problems that develop in a relationship. You got to remember that essentially the first 3 years that you know somebody, you're still, it's not real yet. You're still
Right.
in that infatuation stage, really. So it's not until you've been in it for a while that the real person even emerges in front of you. Okay, so that thing that you found so endearing at first, all of a sudden is annoying as anything, right? So it takes a while to get to that point. And that's the problem. People, they cut and, they just kind of cut and run without being willing to take the time and put the energy in to really trying to make something work. And they forget that they made this vow, that said better or worse, sickness and health,
Right.
And that's what you're supposed to be dealing with. Now, there are exceptions. If somebody is abusive, if somebody is an active addict of any kind, those kinds of things, cut and run. Okay, then no, you shouldn't be in it because that's not healthy for anybody.
Right.
But barring those things, the normal stuff that is just stuff that happens in relationships, you owe it to yourself as well as to the other to try and work it out. And, and to not be selfish, to not just think about your own interests, but think about the interests of the other and the interests, especially if they're kids, the interests of the kids. That, it's certainly, again, if you're in an abusive or addictive kind of relationship, that's one thing. But barring those things, if possible, it's better to remain in a two-parent family when you have kids.
I think a lot of us in this society actually has gotten lazy because a lot of people will break up with someone via text message or Skype
right.
for one reason than literally trying to work it out with a phone call or a visit or things like that. So to me, I'm thinking marriage kind of lost its I guess morality in a lot of way, or it lost that luster because a lot of people just literally won't put the time and effort into trying to save a marriage.
That's absolutely true. And people enter into marriage with false expectations. I think that's also a big part of the problem. That's why I'm saying premarital counseling is a really good idea because it helps you really know what you're getting into. Okay?
Right.
So that's really important, you come in with these false expectations that everything's going to be, fabulous every minute and, lovey-dovey every second, and life just isn't like that. So, that's also, I think, a big piece of it is people don't really know what they're getting into. They don't really put in the time and the effort and the thought into it. It's like parenting. A lot of people, have kids without really thinking about what having kids means, and how they want to raise a kid, and what their values are, and what kind of values they want to give their kids. These are all really important things to think about before you do those things. So, we need a license to drive a car. Unfortunately, we don't need a license to be a parent.
Very true.
Now, Dr. Bloom, let me ask you this. I actually have a two-part question. Well, it's not even a two-part question. It's just two questions. the question. Okay, here's one scenario. Me on my show, I'm a big scenario guy. So that's just
yes,
how
you
I
are.
am.
Yes, you are.
So here's the scenario, Dr. Bloom. All right, you're in a relationship. You've been together for a while. You tend to start arguing a lot. At that point, is it time to move on, or is it something that needs to be, sat down and talked about? Like, what are some steps to salvage the relationship if it can be salvaged?
Well, I mean, the first step is to go and talk to a qualified marriage and family therapist. I think that is the first thing you should do, because you want to set up the parameters for how you're going to deal with each other. Lack of respect in a marriage, which is really what you're talking about when you talk about ordering people around, telling them what to do, whatever, That lack of respect is one of the, they call them the four horsemen of the apocalypse. It's one of the things that signals, the end of a marriage. It's one of the things that most frequently will lead to the end of a marriage. So, if you're finding that you have a lack of respect for your partner, that's a real danger signal. Treating your partner with contempt, that's a real danger signal. Putting them down, that kind of thing. That's a real danger signal that this relationship's in trouble. So, really noticing those kind of things. Also, remembering, again, in a relationship, you need to have a continual degree of romance in that, you want to have a date night once a week, okay, where it is just the two of you connecting. okay? Connecting in the way that you used to do when you were dating or in the early days, so that you spend time really talking to each other, so that you spend time going to a movie together, going dancing, doing whatever you like to do. But doing those things. Also, remembering that your mate can't be your be-all and end-all. That's why we have friends. That's helping,
Right.
So,
Right.
couples that cocoon to the extent where they kind of don't see anybody else, right? It's just the two of them all the time. That's not a good idea. You need your friends. So, all of these are things that you need to be kind of aware of. And when they're not working, you got to get a handle on it and see if there isn't something you can do to turn it around.
Okay. And the second question was, what do you think? Let me see how to put this. What would you say is a good, healthy sexual, relationship? Like, how many times a week would you say sex should be? Sex could be.
Well, you know what? It's a hard question to answer because again, it goes back. Everybody's different. We all have different levels of desire. I can tell you that the typical couple will have after an initial period will settle down sort of into a once or twice a week kind of sexual relationship. That's really pretty typical. That's typical. So now again, think of the old Woody Allen line, with Diane Keaton. He said, we hardly ever have sex. We have sex 3 times a week. We hardly ever have sex. And she says, we have sex all the time. We've got sex 3 times a week. All right. So it's really true. It's your attitude, what your own personal desire level is, which is why it's important to try and find somebody whose sexual appetite is roughly equivalent to your own, so that it doesn't become too big of an issue. But there are also long-term married couples who still have sex all the time. They have sex every day. It's very, very individual.
And that's a nice segue into this question right here, which I've gotten in the chat room. When it comes to people's sex lives and the appetite, like you say, and of course we all like you said earlier, we have those things. A man may want it particularly more than the person they're dating. So that question came up. When is that question a good time to be able to be asked? Is it brand new into the relationship, the first few dates, or later on? Because to me, I think that's kind of crucial. I mean, my appetite might be a little bit more than yours, and that might cause a problem later on in the relationship if it is one. So that needs to be asked as well.
Well, it does need to be talked about pretty early on. I don't know about on a first date, but certainly if it's somebody that you're finding yourself getting into a relationship with, let's put it that way. So you're 4 or 5 dates down the line, 6 dates down the line. By then, yeah, you kind of know whether this is somebody you're really truly interested in or not, And if you are, then yeah, that's one of the things you want to talk about.
Okay.
I tell people don't have sex till you can talk about it.
That's a good point. That's a great point. A question for all the people that are in the dating world, and some people that love relationships. Is there a certain, say you're dating someone, and you guys have not made it official yet? Is there a certain point where you should be able to bring this up to this person and see if they want to be in a committed relationship with you, or should you just go with the flow?
No, I think that it's important to talk about. Because until you specifically state to each other we are in a committed and exclusive relationship, you're not.
Mm-hmm.
Bottom line,
Yep.
You're not. So women forget this all the time. So they do. So it's really important to talk about it. And I think it's something, again, in terms of, let's talk about sex. I mean, you have to know what you can handle. So if you can handle being sexual with somebody, whether it's an exclusive relationship or not, then go for it. If that's something that's fine with you, both partners, right, both people, then nothing wrong with it. But if you know yourself, if you really can't handle that, it's going to make you crazy thinking that this is not exclusive, right? Then don't have sex with them until you know it is.
It's true.
Okay.
And that's the thing to me, especially nowadays. My whole approach on dating, because I'm still, even though I had a failed marriage, I still believe in what marriage means and everything that goes along with the responsibilities. My deal is this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when I'm talking to somebody and I'm getting to know somebody to the point where we're actually getting ready to work on a first date, and then go out on that first date, I'm not that kind of guy where I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to date you Tuesday, and then I'm going to go date somebody else on Wednesday, and then somebody else on Thursday, and so on. My goal is to get to know you enough so we can have these dates without dating multiple people. And then there's some women that I've talked to in the past that be like, okay, well, of course there's no instant commitment, but at the same time, I at least want an effort to get to that point where we can be able to get into a committed relationship. Where's that fine line that's crossed? I mean, as far as, the not pressure, but the actual drive to be able to get into a relationship versus just dating multiple times.
Well, and that's a good point and a good question. It's up to you to say to the other person, I really want to explore this. Would you be willing to just see each other for a little while now, and see where this is going to go, like that? Would you be willing to just see each other for a while and just see where this is going to go? I really want to give this a chance. I like you. I really want to give this a chance. Just like that. Okay, just like that.
And then, Dr. Bloom, I sometimes I'll get the response, well, we'll see.
And if you get a we'll see, then maybe they aren't the right person for you. Okay, then maybe that's your answer.
Very true. Very true.
Okay, then that's your answer. But you're making it clear. We're not going to get sexual yet. Okay, because we're not at that point yet. We're not. We're not saying this is a committed relationship. Mm-hmm. We're saying that we're going to see each other exclusively for a little while and see where it goes. That's all. We're going to see where it goes.
And my deal, too, is, and there's, like I said, it's not many women, but the women that I've dealt with, over the last few years or so, the fear of a guy wanting to commit, be a.k.a. date exclusively and not date multiple people, scares women sometimes in certain cases.
Sometimes it does. That's correct. Sometimes it does. It scares men too. So I don't think that's gender specific.
That's true.
All right.
All right. So it's because it forces people to kind of take a look at themselves, and kind of back up and say, what is it I really want?
Exactly.
So, but if you're dating somebody who really isn't interested in finding an exclusive or committed relationship, then they're not going to be the right person for you anyway.
That is very true.
Okay, so, then you've lost nothing. But if that's what you want, you need to make it pretty clear pretty early on that that's what you're looking for. And if they're not interested, then cool, have a good time, but you're not the person for me. That's all. Yeah.
Well, I have a question on it. I guess it's for both of you.
Let me throw this in. By the same token, and women need to hear this, especially if a guy. Again, I'm going back to this. If a guy doesn't tell you we are in an exclusive and committed relationship, you are not. So then feel free to date whoever you want at the same time.
Yeah.
Oh my.
I guess along those lines, I know that there's multiple different ways to go about the process of getting to know somebody, but I guess my question would have been, is it normal? Is it also normal for someone to say, I think that dating is the way that we should get to know each other. Because to me, I can't make a decision on whether I'm ready to be exclusive with somebody until after I've already had that experience of knowing what they act like or how they conduct themselves in certain situations outside, you know. So just talking up to the point where I decide that I want to get into a date isn't exactly enough.
Well, again, you don't want to do it too early. You know, a first date is too early. You know? So you don't really want it. It's not really the time to have that kind of a conversation until you've already gone out with somebody at least 3-4 times.
Yeah, okay, yeah,
something like
that.
Yeah,
once you get a bearing, then that's closer to the way that I try and go about it.
Right. Not you're not doing this on your first date. Hey, I really like you. Let's be exclusive. No, I mean that's ridiculous.
Let me ask you this.
And again,
Dr. Judi
there's a
Bloom.
difference between exclusive and committed. So keep that in mind.
Okay.
Right?
Well, let me
exclusive doesn't mean committed.
It doesn't?
No, can you illustrate the differences for me?
Exclusive,
Exclusive means we're not seeing anybody else. Committed means we're in this for the long term.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
That clears up a lot. So, ladies, if your man tells you you're exclusive, that doesn't mean he's committed yet.
That's correct. It doesn't mean he's committed. That's what I'm saying. Unless somebody tells you they are exclusive and committed, they're not.
Well, you need to do some reports on that. Make that a PSA or something.
I agree.
Now, let me ask you this, Doctor. Okay. This is actually a topic that's been discussed on our show heavy, and this is actually a two-part question. And the first part of the question is, why do individuals in relationships cheat?
Why do they cheat?
Why do they cheat?
Lots of reasons. Again, for some people it's because they are, compulsively sexual. Okay, they're sex addicts. That's one reason people cheat. Another reason people cheat is because their needs simply aren't getting met in the relationship, and they don't know how to deal with that. So with women, it's usually because their emotional needs aren't getting met. With men, it could be either emotional or sexual needs. But generally, those are the reasons. It's unfortunate because, again, if people would address the real problem and get some help with the real problem, they wouldn't have to cheat, Mm-hmm. But most people aren't willing to really deal with the underlying issues. And you have to ask yourself, if I'm really tempted to cheat, okay, now, I grant you, you might meet this incredibly hot, guy or girl and go, God, I could, definitely be with that person. That doesn't mean that you're going to act on it, right? It doesn't mean you're going to act on it. So that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when you're actually going to act on it. And when you get to that point and you're in a committed relationship, you got to ask yourself, what am I missing in my committed relationship?
Okay.
What's missing there? And when you can identify what that is, deal with that. Deal with that.
Right.
What happened to good old-fashioned communication? Like, I tell you what's wrong with me, you tell me what's wrong with you, we meet somewhere in the middle.
We don't have to communicate anymore.
Well, and that's what a lot of people, do come into therapy for, so that they can improve the way they communicate. One of the things that I certainly do is teach people how to communicate better, because we tend to not really hear the other. We think we know what they're going to say, and so we kind of tune out, or we're so busy formulating what our response is going to be that we don't really hear them, or we misinterpret what they're saying, and we don't check it out enough to know that we're misinterpreting what they're saying. So, or they misspeak. That happens too, right? Somebody says something, but it may be what they said, but it's not what they really meant,
Yeah, I completely agree with that. The communication levels now is not where it used to be, and I think it's because it touches back on what you said earlier. I mean, we're in a society where now there's not quite as much of a stigma behind not working things out, and it's easy for you to say, okay, well, I'm moving on to the next, rather than sticking down and figuring out exactly what the issues were, which is why I say, I mean, now we don't need to communicate anymore. If you have a problem, the people just leave. That's it.
Right, I'm out of here. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
And send you a text message while you do it, too.
That's the coward.
You know what?
Huh?
Dr. Bloom, like that's like what you just said. That's like realistic, because I think I have an issue with doing that sometimes. I think like I get into it with my girl, and then I'll be like, well, I already know what she's gonna say, so I don't even want to hear. I don't perceive what she's gonna say because I already anticipate what she's gonna say.
Exactly. So you don't really listen. Exactly right.
Yeah.
And it's common. You know, that's common.
Yeah.
That's what people do. So one of the things working with a therapist can do for you is really teach you how to communicate. There are specific skill sets that we can teach you to help you communicate better with your loved one. And think of all the fights and arguments and all that stuff you can avoid by doing that. You know, we create our own drama. There's no need for drama. We create the drama.
Wow. Now, the second part of my question was, in your personal experience, who would you say cheat more, men or women?
Well, I can tell you statistically, men cheat more, but women are catching up. That's the answer.
Wow.
So easy. Now you don't think so bad of the females, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I still think it's about the same. I mean, y'all, this is not a race that you want to win, but okay.
No, it's not a race you want to win.
We're learning from you guys. You're our tutors, okay?
That's right.
This is VPD's Wednesday exclusive. We are talking with Dr. Judi Bloom. If you want to call in, that number is 347-215-8653. Once again, that number is 347-215-8653. If you want to call in, you might...
And I think I'm going to have to, sign off pretty quick here because I have my own radio show I have to do tomorrow morning.
Exactly.
And here in Los Angeles.
Also, people, please make sure you go to Dr. Bloom's website, which is www.drjudibloom, J-U-D-I, Bloom, B-L-O-O-M.com. Get all your information. Her phone number is live on there, so if you want to schedule yourself an appointment, all the information you need is right there.
Exactly. And I'd be happy to talk to any of your listeners.
And
Okay,
if you want to hear Dr. Judi Bloom on radio...
Sorry, DV. I just want to ask real quick. Judi, before you go, is it easy to get in contact with you? Because I would like to talk to you outside of the show, because especially to get some recommendations on, how you get into the business of anchoring at first, you know what I mean? Because I'm interested in that, so.
Sure. Just, anybody can send me an email. My email, my easy email, as I put it, my email is Dr. Judi, D-R-J-U-D-I, Dr. Judi, at drjudibloom.com.
Okay.
There you go.
All right? That's the easiest way to reach me.
And if you want to hear Dr. Judi Bloom more on the radio, she will be on the radio tomorrow in the Cali area. Is that right, Dr. Judi Bloom?
That's right. And I'm on Kelly FM, KLLY FM. We call it Therapy Thursday with Dr. Judi. That's me. And it's every Thursday morning at 8:20 on Kelly FM, KLLY FM, which is 95.3 here. And I will give out one phone number. If people want to call in my office and just leave a voicemail on my office machine, I will get back to them. So that number is 310-477-3808. Again, 477-3808, 310 area code. And I will get back to you, I promise.
Now, the last question, the very last question that I have to ask is, Dr. Judi Bloom, when is Dr. Judi Bloom going to get her a Twitter? Because everybody is going to want to follow you. So we need to work on getting you a Twitter, Dr. Judi Bloom.
You're absolutely right. I got to join the join the 21st century.
That's the question. That's the question. A lot of people in these chat rooms is Dr. Bloom has a Twitter yet? Or
yeah, my son, who has a bunch of Twitter followers, my son keeps telling me he goes, Mom, you got a Twitter.
Well, it was a pleasure to have you on, and definitely don't be a stranger. And just the insight that you gave us just from being on this show right now is I hear the passion in your voice, and And trust me, when I get married, you will be my personal go-to person. Believe me.
You got it. I'd be happy to do it.
Yes, it's definitely a real and enlightening experience. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And thanks for having me on, guys. I'm here anytime you want to call.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Judy.
Thank you for listening to the #1 radio station for the people.
Nexxlegacy Radio.